Welcome back, everybody. This is episode number 18 of the Final How. And on this week's episode, I came across this gentleman on Instagram, and I find it to be a very interesting way of hunting. Like, it's super cool. He's a coyote hunter, an avid outdoorsman. Let's bring him in, Mr. Adam Brown. How you doing, man?
Doing good. Doing good. This is an exciting thing to get to sit down and do. This is cool.
Hey, I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time out of your day to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's so I guess for anybody that's wondering, you're a falconer.
Yep. Yep.
You hunt with a falcon or a hawk,
Yeah.
I guess.
Hawks. Yeah, I do hawks. The sport's called falconry, but I've done hawks. I've done red tail hawks, Harris hawks, and then I've done a sharp shin hawk also.
All right. Why don't we start off and just talk a little bit about when you started hunting and kind of what led you into what you're doing now?
Yeah. So I got into falconry about 10 years ago and grew up on a horse farm, and just varmint hunting was basically all I did. Um, Standing around the barn with my dad, talking about stuff, and you're getting pooped on from in the rafters, and you're trying to shoot birds out of the barn all the time, and you're fighting that battle. And we got to talking about, like, we need a hawk in here. Like, how do you get a hawk to live in the barn? It's like, I know, can't pull them out of a tree. Like, DNR will be all over you. Like, there's regulations. We knew that they were protected, but you hear rumors of somebody having a hawk. It's like there's got to be like rules around that and stuff. He, I go to work or whatever. He starts looking it up and comes across some videos. And this is early YouTube stuff, but there was a couple videos of guys hunting rabbits with red tails. So he calls me all worked up and excited, like, hey, you got to check this out. He also looked up the DNR website, see if there's any regulations, and they will send you a packet of they've got falconers' names and phone numbers, and then all the regulations in the state as far as how to house them, how to hunt them, what kind of game you can hunt with them. It just gives you like a basic outline of everything that they're looking at. So I called, got the packet of information, started reading through it, found a guy that was a couple miles from me. It was a falconer, and went and stood around in like 20-degree weather for like 2 hours talking to him about his red tail. And he had just chased a squirrel or something with it that day. And so we were all excited, like, because this is crazy. Like, this guy's hunting with a red tail.
Right.
It's insane, right? So we get to talking to him, and he tells us about the Indiana Falconers Association, that there's a state club. And most states or regions have clubs like this that falconers get together and go hunt, have field meets and stuff. And there was a field meet at the end of February. It's like, okay, well, let's go check that out. So I think it was like maybe a couple weeks out from that. Get online, and I'm trying to find information on it. And back then, there really wasn't a whole lot. Like, you had to really scratch to find anything. So go to this falconry meet, and you walk up, and there's guys pulling. They've got red tails, they've got Harris hawks, which are a desert species. They've got goshawks, which are a northern species. So they're up in the cold in the mountains and stuff like that. And it's wild. Like, you see them on the side of the road dead, right? They get out in front of a car and get hit or something like that. But you never get to
Right.
see one like up close sitting on somebody's fist. And they're intimidating at first. It's very impressive. So you're walking around talking to people, and these people all start breaking off into groups and going out in the field, and they're going to go hunting. And so you're begging, like, please, let me just follow you along. I'll stay out of the way. You're like, whatever you need. They're like, no, come on. And so you go with them. They've got briar chaps and everything on. They're all suited up. And this particular meet was out in Terre Haute. And so we're in town hunting, which was like another odd thing. I didn't think it's odd to hunt in town or whatever. Basically, you go to these like vacant lots or areas that people don't mind for you to walk through or whatever, right?
Right.
And they're all overgrown and stuff. They cut these birds loose and they just let them go. They fly up in the trees, and it's like kind of shocking that they would let them. It's like, oh, they'll come back. Like I don't know how this works. So they start pushing a line, getting a line, start beating the brush. Rabbits start squirting out, and these red tails, and they're hunting one at a time. But these red tails are doing these big wing over dives, and they come pumping through, and they're cutting like in between people sideways, and it was just incredibly impressive. Um, I did not see them catch a rabbit. Other groups did, in other areas. I didn't see a rabbit get caught, but it was just like, oh, I've found what I'm going to be doing forever now. It was just like I have to be a part of this. There's no. I'm doing this. So then you start reading through all the regulations, right? You're like, how do I make this possible? And what you end up having to do is you have to get somebody to agree to sponsor you for 2 years. You have to become an apprentice.
Okay. So you're finding a fellow falconer
Yep.
that
Yep.
has to oversee you for 2 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So they're kind of they're sponsoring. Yeah. Yeah. You're their apprentice. You do what they say, right? Um, a lot of times guys want you to kind of be in the field for a year and kind of see what's going on, because you get a lot of people that are real gun ho to get into this, and then they find out the commitment and everything that's involved, and they kind of flake out. So there's a little bit of a weeding out process. You also have to pass a test through the DNR, and I forget how many questions are on it. I don't know if it's 100 or 200 questions. It's been, it was 10 years ago, but I think you have to pass with like an 80%. Um, so, and you used to have to do that at like a DNR facility. I don't know if that's still a rule or not, but that should all be in the paperwork.
And these are the Indiana. This is Indiana
This is
DNR regulation. Okay. Or is it uniformed across the country, or is it every state got their own?
That's uniformly across the country, but each state has its own test. So Indiana's test will be different from Ohio's test, and across the country. They're all the same topics, the same general stuff. But yeah, you got to pass that. Once you get started, pass your test. You have someone tell the DNR, like, yeah, I agree to sponsor this person for 2 years. Then the DNR will come out and inspect your equipment in your facility. So you've got to have what's called a mew, or like a hawk house.
Okay.
Where you keep the bird, and there's a bunch of rules. It's got to have like vertical bars in case the bird hits the bars and slides down. It's not going to destroy the feathers. There's regulations on like perching material and windows and stuff like that. You need to have jesses, anklets, a glove, and jesses are the leather straps that come down. Anklets are the cuffs that go around the ankles, right?
Okay.
Then you'll have a leash and just kind of all the knickknacks and everything that go along with it, right? And your sponsor helps you with that. Helps you make, and a lot of the stuff they have you make right out of the gate. You can buy it now. There's like Falconry websites, but originally, like when I first got started, you made the majority of your stuff. You bought kangaroo hide or leather in a sheet because it's very lightweight and very durable. And then you have patterns, and you just cut these patterns for your equipment. And then once the DNR says, yeah, you're good to go, they'll send you a band in the mail that identifies the bird that you're going to trap. And it's basically like a real fancy zip tie with a serial number on it. And that goes on the bird's ankle after you claim it. And then you start trapping.
So how do you go? That's what I'm glad you led into that, because that was probably one of my biggest questions I had is where do you find the hawk and how do
Yeah.
you go about getting the hawk or
Yeah.
trapping it, I guess.
So there's as an apprentice, there's two different species you can work with. You've got red tails and kestrels. All right, an American kestrel, and that is the smallest falcon in the U.S. They are, you'll see them everywhere. They're on telephone poles and telephone wires. They're like a large robin or a dove size. A lot of people mistake them for doves. Um, and I think they're just because they're everywhere. They let apprentices have them. Usually you want to do like, it's usually pretty surprising if a sponsor doesn't make you take a red tail as your first bird. And that's not because they're a beginner bird. It's just there's a lot of them and they're very hardy. Like it's hard to mess up a red tail. Um, and what you do is you either you can build a BC trap is what it is, and it's basically a little cage with weights on the bottom of it, and you put like gerbils are easiest because they're just easy to handle. You can go to PetSmart and sign your life away that you're not going to harm this gerbil and it's going to be with you for the rest of your life and all that kind of stuff. And you take the gerbil and you put it in a cage, and the hawk can't get to the gerbil in the cage, right? And then you cover the top of the cage with little nooses with like fishing line, like a
Okay.
30-pound test fishing line. And basically what you do is you drive around and you look at telephone poles, trees, I mean, once you start looking for red tails, they're everywhere, right?
Right.
And you have to find one that is a juvenile because you can't take them out of the breeding population. So, and how you do that, red tails have a red tail, right? You'll find one that doesn't have a red tail. It's got bands on its tail. That's a juvenile. Okay.
Okay.
So it
Right.
hasn't reached sexual maturity. It's not the breeding population yet. It was hatched out in the spring, around the nest in the summer and then pushed out. And now they're out and moving about trying to find territories and stuff. And those are the ones you can start trapping like September 1st. So at that point, you're out running the roads looking for red tails with those bands, those juveniles. Once you find one of those, it's kind of like sky fishing, right? So you'll drive by and say the red tail's on a pole over here. You will drop the trap on the opposite side of the vehicle. You're trying to get as close as you can without bumping the bird. Drop the trap out the opposite side of the vehicle, and the trap just kind of appears as you drive by. It doesn't. The bird's not going to be like, that wasn't there a minute ago. They're going to be like, oh, hey, there's a gerbil down there. And they don't understand that like you can't reach through the wire, right? It's just like grass to them. They're going to reach through it. So you drive off, park, turn around, get your binoculars out. And sometimes it's before you even get turned around, and other times it takes a while. But that hawk is going to find that gerbil out there, come gliding down and land on top of that trap. And it starts working its feet trying to get to that gerbil. While it's doing that, the toes will get caught up in those little nooses and they'll pull them tight as they're trying to work that trap. And you just watch patiently. Sooner or later, the bird's going to get kind of frustrated and go to either jump aside or fly back up to where it was at. And they'll do a big belly flop because they'll go to jump and their feet will be attached to that weighted trap. They'll flop on the ground. And then you just haul ass down there and try to get to them before they drag it out into the road or drag it into a ditch or something. Once you get there, you get out, they're kind of like freaking out because you just come flying up to them and jumped out, right? And
Right.
so they'll have their mouth open and they'll fan out their wings and they're kind of in shock and they think that you're getting ready to eat them. And you just throw a towel over them and you got them. It's right there.
That's
You just
simple.
don't. Yeah, it's really not overly complicated. Yeah, there are other there's a whole bunch of other ways to do it. There's bow nets that have there's like a 6 foot or an 8 foot big bow net with a net on it, and you put a pigeon or some kind of bird or something in the middle. Guys at Ridge Trap will do those. And that's where you get in some kind of a location like coming off the end of Lake Michigan or something, where all those migrating birds are like naturally funneled to a choke point. Um, the coasts are real famous for guys ridge trapping or like mountain ridges and stuff like that. We got birds coming in, but they'll come in and they'll grab that pigeon, and you either have a remote switch or a pull line, and it pulls that trigger, and that bow net just flops over the top of them, and you got them that way. And then there's
Okay.
other different variations of little traps, but the BC trap is the most popular one for red tails.
So what does the, maybe you already said it, I missed it. What's the BC stand for?
It's like bow chartry or something. It's an Indian word because that's like
Okay.
yeah, that's an old trap because like falconry's been around for like 4,000 years,
Right.
right? It's an old and it's I don't know. It started like China and worked its way into India, and then I think through the Crusades, Europeans discovered it and brought that all back up into Europe. So it's a really old world thing, and a lot of these techniques are, I mean, they're not new.
Right. They're thousands of years old.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So now that you've found the juvenile red tail, you've captured it, you threw your blanket
So
over it, you got it in its cage. Now, how do
yeah,
you start the process of
so
becoming
okay,
friends with this thing?
so what you do first, you got to decide if you want this one, right? So you'll have like best thing to use is like pantyhose. You'll put pantyhose over it, and it kind of like a straight jacket. Weigh them. If you're after a female, they weigh more than males because females in raptors are bigger than the males are. So if, say we're after a female, so okay, that weight bracket, I think this is a female. You would then you usually put a hood on them to keep them calm, and so like this is what a falconry hood looks like, right? It's basically like a little blinder. You just put
Right.
that on them, and they're so sight driven. So if you take their sight away, it kind of is like an off switch a little bit. So that calms them down. Put your leather anklets on them, put your jesses on them, and then now you've got this incredibly upset mad hawk tied to your glove, right? Go home, get in a quiet, dark room, get all set up, pull that hood off, and now this bird thinks you're going to kill it and eat it, so it's going to try to flee and get away from you. So now for hours and stuff, and there's some different ways of doing this. Some guys keep them in what's called a giant hood, which is basically like a cabinet, like a box with a door on it, and they'll put them in that and just crack it every so many hours and offer a little bit of food. And they'll do that for a couple days. And it slowly just kind of like being in that darkness all the time kind of resets them a little bit. And every time they see you, they get some food. So they kind of start looking forward to seeing you, right? But usually what people end up doing is they'll pull that hood off, and then the manning process starts. So now you're manning this bird, and it's going to try to get away from you. It doesn't know how to sit on the glove. It just hangs upside down like a giant bat. And you've kind of got to get it to where it realizes, okay, this guy's not going to eat me. I can't get away. Like I'm tired. I'm just going to endure. And so then they'll start sitting on your glove. And you get up and walk around. You might be out in your garage and you're just walking circles, getting the bird to where it's used to being on the glove and sitting. Um, at the end of the day, you offer it like some quail or something. You can purchase quail or raise quail or however you want to do it, but offer like a nice big juicy chunk of meat. Probably won't eat the first day. Okay, whatever. Put it back in the giant hood. Next day, get it out. Repeat the process, and eventually, as that fear level keeps falling and the hunger keeps going up, eventually they're going to eat. Like they're not going to let themselves starve to death. Okay. So once they start that eating process, now all of a sudden it's like you're communicating a little bit with them. You're like, I got something you want. I'm not going to eat you. I'm not going to kill you. Just hang out here. You get them eating, then you start the process of, I've got the food, I want you to come to me. So you'll set them on like a sawhorse or something, right? And you just want them to lean over to kind of get a tidbit, and they'll have to eventually, and they'll fight it for a long time. They'll eventually take a little step over to get just a little bit closer. Just keep working that, and eventually they'll come walking down the sawhorse to you for that tidbit. And then it's a game of, okay, now I want you to jump off of that onto my glove for the tidbit, and you hold it just out of reach. And eventually they're like, well, I have to eat. Like, you know, so then they'll take that step. They'll jump. Okay, now they're jumping to you. Now they jump a foot. Now they jump 2 feet, and the whole time they're on a line, right? Once your leash runs out of slack, there's a tool called a creance, which is just, it's basically like 100 yards of thick line wrapped around a weight. Okay, and you can just kind of unspool it as you need it. So then you unspool like 10 feet of it, whatever, have it right in front of you. Next thing you know, after 2 or 3 days of this, you got them flying across the garage. And it's like, okay, now we got to go outside. You started putting them on a perch. They're sitting on what's called a bow perch. And it's a bow, like, just because it looks like a bow and arrow or whatever, stuck on the ground.
Okay.
They're perched out on that. You can go outside with them, and you just kind of start that over. Set the sawhorse outside, walk them down the sawhorse. That happens pretty quickly because they already know the game. But they're out in the world, right? So there's a little bit of distractions. And you just repeat that process. Get them coming to you. They're flying 10 feet. They're flying 20 feet, 50 feet. Next thing you know, they're in 30 yards across the yard to you. Something else you start watching is you weigh them. So I like doing grams. A lot of people like grams, I think, is the most popular thing to measure in. A lot of people do ounces also. Kind of the old school guys do ounces. But you it's all in your paperwork, right? You got your notes, and I like to print out like a spreadsheet. Now I'll put like the date, weigh them about the same time every day. I know how much they weighed at the time we were working. I know in grams how much I fed them, what I fed them, because different foods have different calorie counts. And if you're feeding quail and then you turn around and feed rabbit, the same, just because it's in grams, the same amount, they may burn those calories quicker, right? So you're bringing their weight down to get the responses that you want, right? It'd be the same with you. Like if we had you and you refused to come to me, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to feed you until you come over here. I got some, and pretty soon it's like, okay, all right, I'm coming, right? It's that kind of thing. So you have them outside, you're doing that. Now, what you got to remember is like you're not training these particular birds to hunt. They've already been hunting. They're already wild birds out in the world doing their thing. What you are giving them, though, is they have such a high mortality rate their first year that it's something like 90% die within their first year.
Oh, wow.
Right. So, yeah, it's a really high mortality rate. So, and I think like once they're in a falconer's care, it's like 10%. I mean, stuff happens, right? You can't avoid it. But life expectancy, and you're going to end up giving that bird a chance to get better at hunting. It may have been just eating mice. It may have went from like mom's care to I'm just eating field mice in the ditch. And that's how I'm subsisting. And that's only going to last for so long once winter comes, right? So you're giving that bird a chance to gain like a lot of experience with a big safety net under him. Once you get them coming across the yard to you and stuff, you can cut them loose, and then it's like time to go hunt. Like it's a quick process. You don't wait for things to get like polished and perfect, because then you're going to start creating like bad habits and behavioral problems with them. You kind of just want to like run at the pace that they'll go. So if I had a red tail that was coming to me like 30 yards, like I could hold up the glove, shake it, and they're coming. Okay, let's go to a field that has rabbits in it, that has rabbits in it. And a lot of those fields end up being in town, like vacant lots. Like if you get something like industrial town that like the factories have moved out and all those have gone abandoned, and they're like you're hopping homeless encampments and stuff. Like those are really good rabbit spots. And you can usually get away with hunting those spots in town because you're not hauling a shotgun around. You're not like, yeah, you just got a bird, right?
Right. Well, I noticed that on some of your videos. It seemed like that's where a lot of you were in those vacant lots.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
wondering, like, you must fall underneath a little, because like a separate set of rules because you're not carrying a firearm in town.
Right. Yeah. You're not doing all the scary stuff that people in town don't want to see. Right. So as long as you have a business or something that doesn't mind you walking around out there, that, a lot of people, you'll go out by like some Walmart and like the tire center or whatever, the guys are like, oh, what? Someone ends up noticing you, but a lot of times when they come over and start talking to you, they're like, oh yeah, go, there's rabbits everywhere. Go back there behind that or go do whatever. So it's not too hard to get permission usually when you pull a bird out. Um, so throw the bird up, start kicking, piles. Usually these birds are like, they're really good at pattern recognition. So once they figure out that like they'll follow you, they're like, hey, there goes my food guy. Like I can't see him anymore. So they'll come around and start following you naturally. And once you start producing game and they figure that out, like they're stuck to you a lot of times. It's hard to shake them. Um, cool things about red tails is they are, of course, you see them everywhere, so they're naturally suited for Indiana and the Midwest and stuff. They're just a really good bird. They'll end up when you're hunting those thick spots. They have a really cool thing where they'll float out when they see a rabbit take off. A lot of times they'll float out above it and they'll do what's called a wing over. Well, they'll like invert and turn and go straight down, and they do not touch the brakes before they hit the rabbit. Like it's full on. So I'll tell you, the first rabbit I ever saw killed was my red tail, and I had a male the first time, which was a little bit smaller. But I had a male, and I was me and my wife out, and I'm still learning. I don't know all the stuff. Had my red tail up, and she was like 70 feet up in this tree that was across the road from this little lot that we were trying to push rabbits in. And rabbit jumps out. You yell ho ho ho, because you want to make noise, so the bird turns and looks at you. And my red tail goes floating out, very nonchalant. It wasn't like he was hauling after this thing. Goes floating out, does that wing over, folds up, and doesn't touch the brakes. Just right into the weeds and hits the ground. And you hear this big thud. And it was like, he killed himself. My bird just killed himself. So you go running over there, and he had hit this rabbit in like 2 or 3 inches of mud and water, and had buried this rabbit's head under the water and had a hold of it. And of course, it's like, you start screaming stuff, get a hold of the rabbit. Usually what you end up doing is you dispatch it then. So you give it the stretch. And so it doesn't have to be eaten to death, because that's what hawks will do to you. They'll eat you to death. And so you don't want that. So you'll stretch the rabbit so it doesn't suffer anything. But yeah, it's exciting. The first time you get to see something like that.
So is there an advantage of having a male versus a female?
A lot of times it's the other way around. Guys will want to fly a female as opposed to a male. The males are a little bit faster on the jump, getting going, because they're lighter weight, a little more aerial in their flight style and stuff. And they'll do really good. They'll take anything that a female will for the most part. But they like the power that a female has. And that goes with Harris hawks, goshawks, some of the big falcons and stuff. They like that power. The females just they tend to be a little more down to business, and from the ones I've experienced, and they're just very powerful. You get a big female red tail. She's also better at penetrating brush, because they've got that weight coming behind them, and they'll fold up like a dart, and then they'll bring their feet right up under their chin and just crash it. Like it's incredibly impressive what they can blow through to hit a rabbit that's like squirting out through the brush and like the thistles and thorns and stuff. You start rabbit hunting and getting into those spots. It's basically you go to a field and you look at the thickest, nastiest, most horrible thing that you don't want to walk through, and it's like that's where the rabbits are. So I'm going to go walk through that, right? Which leads into like wanting to get dogs, and then you start going down that path, right?
Right. And I've noticed in some of yours, like, you're a houndsman, you've got a dog with you.
Mm-hmm.
How do those two work together?
So because the birds are good at recognizing patterns, right? It's the same with us as the dogs. They recognize that. So I had a beagle to begin with. Now I'm not a beagle fan. It could be that I'm just not that beagles fan, but I've had this guy for maybe 6-7 years, something like that. And he goes out, starts barking, and the birds pick up like, hey, when this dog starts barking, like rabbits are running. Like they recognize that after a while. I wasn't a big fan of beagles. I got this one for free. He came to me. He was 3 years old when I got him, and this old guy was getting out of the beagle game, and this was the youngest dog he had, and he wanted it to go to someone who would hunt, and so it kind of got like I volunteered to take him. There are a lot of people that do hunt and do well with beagles and stuff, and I think to do really well with beagles, you need like a couple of beagles, and at least this one's very loud outside. He's like a hunting hound, right? He like sits out in the kennel and screams and howls and barks all the time, nonstop. Can't bring him in the house. He'll second you take your eyes off him, he's peeing on something, and it's like he can't really be in the house and stuff. I don't know. I just wasn't a big fan of him, but the hawks do figure it out. They do figure out that little thing that they don't really like does chase rabbits. And so they'll follow because hawks, you'll hear about farmers, man, like running combines and stuff. They get those windrows narrowed down and start pushing rabbits and stuff out, and they'll have hawks. I've got a buddy that's always calling me saying bald eagles are following him, smoking rabbits out in the middle of these cut cornfields. It's that. It's just a different.
They're just recognizing, like,
yeah,
hey, anytime I see this or hear this, there's food around.
Yeah, every time a combine fires up, all the hawks and the eagles and stuff start watching them because same thing.
That's awesome. It really is. Like this really fascinates me how you just take that hawk, you've trained it now, it stands there on your arm. You walk out, it takes off.
Yeah.
And then boom, you jump a rabbit, you got it.
Yeah. So it's a lot of fun. Another thing that you'll end up getting, like if people get into falconry and stuff, they'll ask like, how do you keep from losing them? And it's like, well, it does happen. Guys do lose birds a lot. One way that we combat that is we use telemetry. And so they'll have like, this is one example. This is a leg mounted one, but this is a little transmitter and it runs on a radio frequency and it sends out a beep, like a signal, right? And then if you've ever seen like those National Geographic things where they're like tracking tigers and there's got some big neck collar on, they got that big antenna pointed up. Well, we've got like miniature versions of that. And it's like a directional antenna. So if you lose track of your bird and you cannot find it, you click that thing on and start sweeping it around and it beeps and you're like, oh, it's that way. And then you start turning the signal strength down to where you can't quite pick it up and you walk that direction. You start picking it up again and it will walk you right into your bird. So
how long do they live, I guess, or how long do you typically keep one? Do you keep one till it, it dies, or do you release it after a certain amount of time?
Both. They do both. Right. So a lot of guys that fly red tails, they'll fly red tail for a couple years if it's doing well. But once they go into once they get really experienced, they have a tendency, and they go through like their sexual maturity. It changes their attitudes a little bit. You start hunting in late spring, that bird's thinking about mating and flying off and stuff a little bit more than they are hunting. They also, as they get older, they can get picky about what rabbits they chase, which can be frustrating. You get a young bird that just chases everything. It doesn't know I can't get that. So it tries and it'll pull it off occasionally. It'll pull off some spectacular flights, right? And so yeah, it just depends on what people are after. A lot of guys, they'll fly them and then they'll fly them for a season. They don't want to take care of a bird through the summer. They'll feed it up to where it's nice and fat and cut loose in the spring, and then just kind of rinse and repeat.
Okay. So have you ever, or if anybody ever, I guess if you've done that like 2 years later, like surely he remembers, or that hawk, surely it remembers you.
Yeah. So, yeah, I've heard stories of that, of birds coming back to people's houses. I cut a big female loose that I had for 3 years, and it was over at my parents. And my dad rides horses, right? So he's always training horses and got training horses out there that he's riding. And he's like, I know it was that bird. He goes, she let me ride right up underneath her. And then I don't know for sure if it was her, but then build a nest over at the pond we have and raise the chick out of that nest. And it was just like, what? Like, never had a hawk there before. I cut one loose, and a couple months later, one builds a nest right in the middle of what we're doing and raises a chick there. It's like, I can't prove it, but pretty good odds it was her.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. It truly is. So I guess my next question for you, what would be the next hawk you'd want? Like what's
next hawk? So
yeah.
Let me tell you what I'm doing right now. So right now I've got a female Harris hawk. Okay. And so I got a dog here trying to climb up my lap too.
Oh, you're fine.
But I've got a female Harris hawk right now and hunting rabbits with her. And she is flying over a English Cocker Spaniel. So it's a small Flushing dog. And the goal for her right now is we're building a dog right now is the goal. So I started getting into accipiters last year, which is a classification. You've got sharp-shinned hawks, Cooper's hawks, which are always getting like guys pigeon coops and stuff like chicken coops, and then goshawks. And that's your accipiter class. Okay. They're extremely fast. They fly off the glove. The sharp shin, you hunt birds with it. Cooper's hawk, you'd hunt birds. Well, all these birds can hunt birds. They're like bird hawks, right? So with the Sharpie, the main quarry that I was hawking was English sparrows. And so they'll hide in the grass and stuff from you, and you walk them up. You just walk out in the field, kind of like you're hunting quail or something, right? And as they flush out ahead of you, the hawk on your glove, and this bird this Sharpie, was probably like the size of a robin or a blue jay, just like a little guy. And he would dart straight out in front of me and catch those on the rocks, and then come down to the ground. And it was a lot of fun. It was like a more potent form of what I've been doing with the rabbits and stuff. A lot of detail, good, because the smaller the bird gets, the more detail oriented you have to be, because little nuances can mess up. He actually passed away recently. And I'm not sure. I think it had to do with something I was putting on the leather, treating the leather that was on him. I think poisoned him. So there's all these little caveats to like just taking care of these birds that goes into it, that like you're going to make mistakes. Things happen. Birds get killed out in the field. They'll hit a fence and get killed, or they'll hit a tree, or you'll be out like with that small one, and a Cooper's hawk will come streaking out of a tree that you didn't see and snag your bird right in front of you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So like there's things that eat them out there, right? You'll get guys out west that hunt these beautiful hybrid falcons, right? I mean, and they're as big as a red tail. They're like gyr falcons mixed with peregrines and stuff, and not cheap. They're expensive, and they'll hunt sage grouse, and they'll have some beautiful flight, and it'll kill it just over the hill, and they'll have a golden eagle come down out of the heavens and drop down on their bird and carry their bird away.
That'd be
And
enough to really make a guy mad.
oh yeah. Or like there's guys that hunt like white Siberian goshawks, right? And it's these it's a great big white bird. So everybody can see it. And the same thing, it'll go chasing something down over the horizon around the corner, and eagles will get them. So
So,
like
have you ever worked with an eagle, or is that something
no.
you can
So
do?
the eagles are so I've been in the field hunting with one, right? So there's an organization called NAFA, so North American Falconers Association, and they kind of run uh, field meets and stuff for that. They have one giant one a year, and people from kind of international community will come in, but all over the country come to a central location. And the location changes every year. The one I went to was in Lubbock, Texas, and went out there, and there was some falconers that had golden eagles. Okay, golden eagles are like very well suited to falconry. They've been hunted over in Europe, and you see videos of like people hunting wolves in Mongolia with them, which I don't think it happens as much as you think it happens. Probably it's more of a tourist thing, is what I've heard. There are some legit people out there, but a lot of it's just touristy stuff. But out west, and it's big in Germany and England, because there you can breed them and have them. Here in the U.S., the regulations are so tight around golden eagles. I think they give like 6 permits a year. They have to be taken in a depredation area, which is designated. I think the depredation zones are typically out in Wyoming, and it's eagles that are killing lambs
Oh,
in
wow.
like
Okay.
sheep pastures, right? So that to prove, and I'm not the authority on this, but from what I've gathered, you have to prove that an eagle is killing lambs, and then trap that eagle. And then the others, I think, are taken, like they may be like struck by a vehicle or have lead poisoning or something, end up in rehab, and falconers acquire them that way. But they are impressive. They are very large, and they're hunting typically jackrabbits with them out west. Um, I know in Europe they can hunt roe deer, which is a small species of deer. They hunt those with them along with the hares that they have in Europe. Um, they're cool. They're cool, but they are like, if you were to do one here, you would have to travel out west to really hunt it, because you just don't have the space in the quarry to hunt it here. You start working in like exotic species and stuff like that, and you start running into problems where you don't have the right quarry for the bird, because in the end of it, right, like we're game hawking here. This isn't like it's a hunt. You're hunting wild quarry. Otherwise, it's not falconry. You're just kind of like pet keeping, like people with parrots or something like that. And that's not what we're doing here. So usually, you have the best luck if you have native species on native game, or at least a species that is familiar. You're at least hunting a hawk that hunts the same type of quarry that you have around here. So like rabbits. So like the harris hawk that I have right now, that's a Sonoran desert bird. So they're found in like western Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, northern Mexico, that sort of area. So but they hunt rabbits out there. Rabbits, jackrabbits. Guys take ducks with them. Guys have taken quail with them. So that size game, and that species is really good at cooperative hunting. So you can hunt them on what's called a cast. So you can have several harris hawks out at the same time, and they are kind of like dogs. So like they recognize, you go that way, I'll go this way. So they kind of get that game, where some of the other species may not. They take a little bit longer to mature, because animals that stick with their parents tend to mature a little slower. So you just kind of work with them a little bit longer. But they're cool. They're very easy. A lot of people that do abatement work will use Harris Hawks, where you're like um, keeping pigeons off fancy buildings and stuff like that. Guys will use Harris Hawks or scaring seagulls out of dumps because they'll end up with a big landfill that has 10,000 seagulls descend on it. And they pick stuff up and then fly over people's homes and drop this stuff. You got trash raining from the sky, right? So they'll take those Harris Hawks and send that hawk out. And they'll do a big loop and spook all the birds off, and they'll keep the birds out of the landfills. Or there's guys out in California and Arizona and wherever they have like great big vineyards, and they'll run falcons out of those vineyards right when the grapes mature because they don't want like clouds of starlings descending in and carry like $90,000 worth of grapes off in like a couple hours, right? So they'll run these falcons out there and keep all these birds off the grapes.
That's crazy. That's
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, I'm sure that's an income for those guys, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean,
So they'll go out there, they'll go out and camp for like 3 months. They'll just live in a tent in the back of their truck with their 3 or 5 falcons or whatever, and they just rotate them. These guys usually they don't want their bird to actually catch something, so that's like a business model, right? That's not game hawking, that's abatement. So those guys are typically really good game hawkers. They just use this as an avenue of income or whatever, and so they'll fly those hawks, like fly some in the morning, fly some in the evening, and just whenever those birds come in, they just make their rounds. And I do not know the numbers, but say, it's the vineyard decides they're losing like $90,000 worth, and you offer like, hey, well, for $30,000, I'll come out here and camp for 3 months, and save.
right.
And whatever the difference, and they run an equation, I'm sure they have a business model, but yeah, here I don't know that you can do that. I don't know that the environment is like we would have an opportunity to do that. Maybe some abatement work around resorts or something, but that abatement work with falcons in the Midwest, I don't think is really a thing.
So that's more of a Western deal, probably, like you were saying, and around the vineyards and stuff.
Right. All those big fancy farms and stuff like that. Yeah.
That's cool. So let's go into a little bit into your coyote hunting. That's how we found you. Now, is there any way, has anybody ever tried to do any kind of falconry work or hawking work with coyotes?
Yeah. So there's guys out west with those golden eagles. There's guys catching coyotes out there with them. Usually from my understanding, it's not necessarily a targeted prey item. I think these guys, I've seen some videos of guys, they're hunting like white-tailed jackrabbits out of a soar. So they'll send their eagle up. Eagle's doing big laps and gets elevation. And then they're working on flushing jackrabbits, and their eagle spots a young coyote, right? So then they flush that coyote. Eagle comes down, smacks it, balls it up, gets head control, and it's got it. And I know there's guys that take them out there. Like I said, I don't think it's like intentionally targeted, but I mean, it happens. Yeah. You got to be careful too. You can catch dogs and you can catch cats.
That's what I was getting ready to ask. How many times does that happen?
Yeah. So I had a Harris Hawk that caught my beagle. She didn't like it. You'll have, and birds will get frustrated with dogs. Like they expect things to happen. They want rabbits flushed, and they'll get frustrated, just like anybody else who gets frustrated, right? And they tend to take it out on the dog. So your dog's trotting along, like doing its thing, and the bird attacks it from behind, or they'll fly by and smack them in the back of the head and keep going and just start tormenting the dog. And you just kind of have to, I've heard stories also of hunting in town, and someone pulls out their like little miniature poodle across the street and letting it go to the bathroom, and the hawk's like, oh, hey, it takes off after it and catches it. And it's just like, oh my God. Cats are dangerous. No, you got to be careful with cats because their teeth and their talons and stuff, their claws are like little needles and little razors and stuff, and feral cats can end up being a problem.
Yeah, I'm sure a big Tom feral cat could tear up.
Yeah, yeah. So you got to be careful. Usually, like I've got some cats around here that are like our cats, and the hawks recognize them because they see them all the time, and they don't really view them as a prey item. So when I've flushed cats in the field, I've never had a bird go after a cat. So yeah, I've been able to avoid that. But I know some of the other podcasts I listen to, guys talk about running into cat colonies because they'll be out looking for rabbits, and you'll have somebody who is feeding feral cats. And they start building little cat houses and putting cat food out and little heaters for them and stuff in the winter. And you'll go into a field that used to be a really good rabbit hawking spot, and there's nothing there. And then you can walk around the corner and there's 20 cats hanging out because they've got this feral cat colony. So I know I haven't personally seen that, but I know that's an East Coast problem. Guys talk about that all the time out there.
So I feel like I'm terrible at this because I have no clue about falconry. So what are some more things? Like what should I be asking you that somebody that's never watched or heard or seen anybody work hawking before? Like, I mean, I think you've done a hell of a job covering everything. I've learned so much, but I just feel like there's more I should be asking you.
One thing, and we'll get into the coyote thing here in a minute. One thing I think that I'm really starting to enjoy is the dog work that's going into the falconry. You know, you start the problem that I run into being out in the country is there are not a lot of rabbits here. You go talk to somebody who hawks in town, and the amount of slips, which a slip is when you flush something out, the amount of slips they're getting and the amount of rabbits they catch is, you think they're lying to you. You're like, no, there's no way you're getting that many until you go experience it. And it's like, oh, this is a totally different animal than what I'm dealing with out in the country. Out in the country, I can go hawking, and you would see the ass end of a rabbit twice and just get a flush of it, and your bird may not even see it. And a lot of times your bird will catch stuff that you don't even see because it's got a height advantage. But it can be incredibly frustrating out in the country trying to, especially with the new farming practices where a lot of people are getting they're combining fields, they're getting rid of fence lines and stuff like that, where all that edge habitat that rabbits and like quail and stuff used to hide in, it's not there anymore. Right. And then you compound that with the predator issue of having coyotes. You end up with a good snowfall and you go into these spots that you're trying to hawk, and there's coyote footprints everywhere, and there's no rabbit footprints. There's no rabbit tracks or nothing. So, and that's kind of where I got serious about predator hunting and hunting coyotes and stuff. But the other thing you start falling into is the dog work with the beagle that I've had. And then just recently I was contacted by another falconer that I know who had bred a litter of English Cocker Spaniels, and one of the dogs was in a home where another English Cocker Spaniel was beating him up. And it was another falconer, and he was like, I can't have a dog fight in my house every day. So we need to find another falconer to take this dog. And I got nominated to be that falconer, and they got a hold of me, and it was like, yeah, I've been looking for like a flushing dog that worked really close. That was my recent obsession, looking into that stuff. So yeah, I got this little English Cocker Spaniel and started doing the dog work. I've seen a lot of guys that are out west that are hunting goshawks off the fist. They're using pointers, and they just get into these dog lines, and it's like some amazing dog work, right? And it's fascinating to watch those guys. They do a lot of gun hunting also, but the falconry crossover, and then you start getting into long wings, which are your falcons, and those guys are running big pointers out there on sage grouse, and they'll run those dogs in like these massive, beautiful environments. Dogs get on point, They'll get a falcon out of the back of the truck, pull the hood off, falcon takes off. It goes up to 600, 800,000 foot. They walk in, flush these birds. These birds fly off, and these falcons come down and just cut right through them. It's amazing to watch. They'll duck hawk, so they do the same thing. They'll flush ducks off a pond, and you take them with falcons or goshawks. And there's just so many avenues through this, and everybody's doing it just a little different. So once you start getting involved in social media, start making videos and stuff, and people start noticing you and talking to you, and you really get to get a good idea of who's being successful, why they're being successful, what type of dogs they're running, how they're training their dogs, what type of birds they're flying. Another interesting caveat to all this is you can do imprints also, right? So there's, of course, rules and regulations around this, but the basic idea is you do nest locating in the spring, locate these nests, and get climbing gear. These guys climb 60, 70 feet up into these trees, and they pull out these little golf ball sized chicks, right? And depending on the species, like if it's a goshawk, you've got this very angry bird trying to skin you alive while you're taking these chicks out, right?
Right.
And then these guys take them out, and they lower them down and look through them, and then they you have to leave something in the nest, so they'll leave whatever they're not taking, so the mom has something to rear. But yeah, so then you've got these imprint birds that you're imprinting, and that adds like a completely different psychological development to these birds. So now you have an animal that is not afraid of you at all. In fact, it sees you originally as a parent, then as a sibling, and then once they reach sexual maturity, like possibly a mate. And then that's how they get into artificial insemination and creating hybrids and stuff like that. And then guys end up breeding them, and they'll hybridize different species, which gives them different personality traits and stuff. It's this is like a runaway topic. It's just fascinating. I have not gotten into any of the breeding aspect of it. The Harris Hawks I've had have been captive bred, but they're not hybrids of any type. And they're captive bred also are different personalities than the wild Harris Hawks. The captive bred ones are the very popular ones because they're a lot calmer than Harris Hawks you take out of the wild. Is why they're so popular. But back to what you asked me a couple questions ago about like what I was looking at flying next.
Right.
I had a lot of fun flying that Sharpie, that was a sharp shinned hawk, and it was just a different version of what I've been doing, a much more intense version of what I've been doing. Right. And it was a lot of fun, and it was very fast paced. I got that bird when it was maybe 12 days old, and up until I had him last week. Right. And within a month, they go from golf ball size to a fully feathered bird, fully feathered hawk that you've trapped, sparrows, and you're given an experience to try to kill things and catch things. And then you're off to the tracks, man. You're off hunting and flushing things and catching stuff. And that bird left my glove so fast that I couldn't hold the jesses. Right. So you just had to let it sit on your glove without holding on to it. And it would identify that a bird had flushed and leave your glove before you figured out what it was going at. You just had to trust that it was going after something. And
that's the one I've seen in some of your Instagram videos where you're just walking along and then that thing's riding on your hand.
Yeah.
And then just like to snap your fingers, man. That thing just boom, be gone. And just watch it dive into that grass.
Yeah.
Just wild looking.
So yeah, it's cool. One thing also you can't. So what you're doing with that bird in particular is you're targeting English sparrows and starlings, and you can hawk them year round. They're an invasive species. There's no regulations on those, right? But you can't tell it what to catch. Like whisper, like, hey, don't catch that one. That's a native species. Like I can't turn it off. It's a light switch, but I can't aim it. I don't, So there are rules around catching stuff out of season or species that aren't game species, And the rule with that is like leave it lay, right? Because those hawks catch that stuff. That's native hawks catch native species. That's what they eat. They've been eating those for millions of years. Like you're not gonna just because someone came in and made rules doesn't turn off that for that bird. So they're allowed to eat it in the field. You just can't pick it up and leave the field with it. So like if someone caught me carrying a pocket full of robins around, or name whatever little bird, like I'm in trouble, right? Because that's not a game species. That's a songbird. They're regulated. They're protected. You can't just hunt animals, right?
Right.
Like they're not going to let you do that. But if your bird snags one, like and it injures it beyond the point of release, like okay, trade it off. You have to leave it in the field and just move on. You just make sure that there's no value associated with that bird, because once you start taking them home, then their food. Now they have value to them, and then that's when the DNR gets all involved, and they don't like that kind of stuff.
So when you're with your red tail and you're out hawking for rabbits, are you still within the normal, I guess, Indiana rabbit season dates, or do you have a different set of dates for yourself?
We got different dates. It's September 1st through the last day of February.
Okay.
So, but
it starts earlier then, basically.
It starts earlier, yeah. But hawking in September, like after rabbits, is not pleasant typically. Like you're covered in bugs and spiders and sweating through your clothes, and you can't see your bird that's in a tree because the trees are still green and all the brush is green. So a lot of guys will hold off until stuff starts kind of cooling off and dying back before things really start ramping up.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I like the accipiters. That's piqued my interest. Cooper hawks, size wise, are very like attractive because they can hunt quail for one. Like you couldn't find a better quail hawk. Just the explosion off the fist and everything. But Cooper hawks are kind of like murderous psychopaths. They are like very difficult to manage is their reputation. It's almost like a forbidden fruit, right? I'm told they're very, very difficult, and it makes me want them more. So I know a lot of guys or falconers. There's some very good women falconers also. They'll end up flying them, and no one really keeps them for a very long, extended amount of time. Every once in a while, you'll find one on social media, someone who has like been extremely successful, and they'll have one that's molted out in its adult plumage, and it's just like, oh man, I want that. I want what that guy's got going on, or that falconer's got going on. They can catch rabbits too. Rabbits are on the top end of their what they can handle, but they can totally do it. There are people out smoking rabbits with Cooper hawks, and that's some cool stuff. That's cool.
That's awesome. It really is. It's such a fascinating art. To me, it's an art what you do. It's to go out to catch this thing and train it, become basically friends with this bird, with this hawk, and then go out and hunt with it and watch it work is just truly amazing to me.
Yeah. And I tell you, there's a group of guys in Southern Indiana that run goshawks, and they've just got in a clique of guys, and they're extremely good at it. That's another thing. Goshawks are they fall in that accipiter classification, right? You flush a rabbit, it makes it 15 feet. I mean, they're just like a wasp. They just on it fast. The red tails and Harris hawks are cool. Like they get it done. They've got a really good reputation and stuff. But like somebody who's got a good goshawk, it's almost supernatural what they can do sometimes. Like how they maneuver. if they hit and miss, just the way they're built that they can lift off and take off again and then catch the rabbit going the other direction. It's really cool.
So your red tail is more like, say, your German Shepherd, and that
Yeah.
Goshawk's more of like your Belgian Malinois. Like,
Yeah, it's exactly. That's a perfect analogy. Yeah. Yeah,
like
that's
they're
exactly
just
what it's
super
like.
athletic.
So they're cool.
I know
Yeah.
I went down the rabbit hole after I found your Instagram page here and was going. Then I was finding videos from guys all over and just going. I was doom scrolling, man. I think I sat there for an hour on my phone, just video after video. And I didn't know there was so many different. I guess I knew, but to
Yeah.
see so many different hawks or falcons and the language and the terminology guys are using,
Yeah.
to somebody like me that's never put a thought about it, and then it's like, holy crap, this is a whole world.
Yeah. And I'll tell you and for people who want to get into it and stuff, but it's so much easier now to find at least examples of falconry because of social media. When I got started, I mean, there was like maybe a dozen videos on YouTube and they were grainy and you really couldn't tell. And none of the information, like there were some forums and stuff, but their forums, there's just like social media pages now where you get in there and you don't know who's saying what kind of credentials they have. They're just like blabbering nonsense. And a lot of the information, like you had to pay for it. You had to buy books. And there are some spectacular books out there. Like there's I got some examples that's like North American Falconry and Hunting Hawks. It's like this massive, it's a 2-volume giant,
Oh, wow.
It's and there's all kinds of books like that. Let's see, Mike's Falconry, there's Western Sporting, there's some websites that you can order these books off of. And they do a good job of laying it all out. And that's, if you end up taking a falconry test, you'll have to read all that stuff, and it kind of gets you up to speed on it. But yeah, nowadays, man, like there's podcasts, like we were talking about earlier, podcasts and all kinds of social media stuff, and it's just really cool. Yeah.
So if somebody is watching this, they've watched this all the way through, and they're like, this is something I want to get involved with and learn.
Yeah.
Can you just go over again what somebody needs to do? What is their very first step into learning this trade?
The first step, you need to get a hold of your local club, wherever or in whatever state you're in. There's going to be a local club somewhere that does this. Okay. And they have field meets a couple times a year. Go to a field meet and meet and like see it in person, right? Because it's one thing to watch it online and stuff. To actually see it, you kind of get a broader idea of what all is involved in it and meet people, right? Because there is a pretty high barrier of entry in the United States that keeps people who are kind of flakes or non-serious, or they if you're somebody who jumps from one hobby to the next every year, it's like, this probably isn't the best thing for you, right? Because you're taking care of a bird that is completely dependent on you to do things correctly. So state club, and then get a hold of your state DNR or whoever has the regulations and get the information from them. So once you have those two things, that's kind of, you can take off running from there. Your club will have some book recommendations like what I was talking about. Get the book, read them. Don't just look through for something interesting, like read them, because if you end up doing it, you're going to be tested and you have to pass the test, right? The other caveat is when, or advice I would say is when you go out hawking with people and you want to be there, if they say we're leaving at 2:00, don't show up late. They will leave you. Because they've had people show up late, like you get burned. Like when you first get into it, and someone's like, "Oh yeah, I want to come." You wait around for them. Like these birds this is all like time sensitive, weight controlled stuff. Like these guys have been planning this specific hunt time for like days. Like they know what's coming up, and if you show up late, they like, sorry, gone, bye. Like you're not showing them the respect that they deserve for going through all of this, right? So And then a lot of times guys want you to show that you're consistent. So they want you like, if I say I hawk 3 or 4 times a week, call me if you want to go, and then you're not consistently going, they're probably gonna not be mean to you, but like,
Right.
go hang out with somebody else or go hawking with somebody else. But if you want in, like you kind of have to be like, I'm not leaving. I'm your shadow now. And then once if they're not going to sponsor you, they'll be like, hey, this person is showing a lot of interest. They've been showing up to the field. Who do we got that's going to sponsor somebody? And they'll figure it out. They'll help you figure it out.
Which that barrier of entry respectfully should be high for what
Yeah.
you guys for what you're doing. You know, in my opinion, this is pretty intense stuff. I mean, for one, you're taking a bird, a magnificent bird out of the wild
Yeah.
and bringing it in and training this thing. You know, you don't want somebody. I can
Yeah.
understand why you wouldn't want just your average Joe Blow going out and trapping, let's say, 20 hawks in a week and killing every one of them. You know, nobody wants that to happen. You know,
Usually what ends up happening is people get into it and they get someone to sign the paperwork and say they're going to be a sponsor. They get a bird trapped and they really don't hunt with it. They go out a couple times, but they don't do it on a consistently enough basis, and it ends up being like a parrot. Like they just want it to say they have a hawk, and it just ends up sitting on a perch, and they just throw food to it, and they don't like we're game hawkers, right? Like this is falconry. It's a sport. It's an activity. You have to do it. You have to take wild game with a bird of prey, right? That's the goal. We're not like it's not an exhibition or like there are avenues for people to, if they want to take a bird into a classroom and stand in front and talk about a bird of prey, there are ways to do that. You get hooked up with raptor rehab facilities and start working for them. They do educational programs, which is honorable. That's great. If that's what you're into, like there's an avenue for that. This is not that avenue.
and that's what, to me, probably what drew me in and makes this more fascinating is you're taking this thing and using it for what its intended purpose in life is to
Yeah.
hunt.
Yeah, it's like really hardcore bird watching.
Right. You know, it's not versus, which, like you were saying, yeah, I find that neat. But if I see a lot of pictures or videos somebody has of, you know, a hawk in the corner of their house, oh, that's okay. Like he said, that's cool to me.
Yeah.
Hey, all right. That's awesome. That's what you want to do. But you're
Yeah.
taking these things and going out into the wild
Yeah.
and watching this thing up close and personal, what
Yeah.
it does every day to survive.
Yeah. Yeah. They're out there doing it every day. And I mean, they're built to be out there doing it. Like this is natural for them. That's kind of the thing. And it's interesting to watch them learn and have different styles and how like there's kind of a general rule for each species, but they really can develop like individual flight styles and habits and things that I mean, it just keeps it interesting. Like no two birds are the same, right? And I know you asked me how long they live when we first got started. Some of the larger species, I mean, they can make it 20 some years. I mean, they are a long lived. I think the eagles can make it like 60, 50, 60 years, something like that.
Wow.
Um, Now, in the wild, I think, like I said earlier, like 90% die in the first year. And then I think maybe only 10% past that make it to the age of 5. So, like, when you see an adult, like, that bird's no joke. It knows what it's doing. It's kind of like the creme de la creme of the local population. Um, but yeah.
Have you ever noticed the population and like the red tail hawks or anything explode in, let's say, the last 10 years? That's kind of off topic, maybe a little bit, but from
No,
what
but
I notice now, when I was a kid, it didn't seem like you've seen near as many, like in this area, red tails, for an
yeah.
example. Now it seems like every freaking power pole has a red tail on it.
Yeah. And I don't know how much of that is you just becoming aware of them.
Okay.
Like, yeah, because I'll talk to people that like, they're like, oh man, ever since you showed me that stuff, like I see them everywhere now. It's like, yeah, they just weren't on your radar. You just weren't seeing them. I mean, that being said, they used to shoot them off fence posts and have
Right.
ads. They used to advertise ammunition for shooting hawks, right? Like that was a thing. Like every hunter was encouraged for the small game populations to shoot hawks. And so, and that, I think that was a big topic of conversation back in the day because they went from like they were vermin, everyone was to shoot them, kind of like the coyotes, to all of a sudden they're federally protected, you can't touch them. And falconers before that were kind of in this gray zone where like whatever they could do whatever they wanted. Now all of a sudden they were criminals because you weren't allowed to have them. It's like no, this is like we're helping them. How can you just ban it? Like you can't just ban it. And so there was a big push, and that's what got a lot of these state clubs funded, and that North American Falconers Association put together, and it was kind of helped start the conversation between the people who were practicing the sport and the people writing the regulations. Right, there had to be a conversation there because without that conversation, there was no representation. They were just criminalizing things that were not criminal. And so there's a big push, and that's kind of how you get into having a good relationship with your local DNR and stuff. Because we're very lucky in Indiana that we have a good relationship with the DNR. Because some states view it a lot differently. I think there's some states on the West Coast or on the East Coast. I won't name any because I don't know it really well, but I've heard it's they're on you. Like they're looking for a reason for you to be breaking the rules, and they want to come down on you hard. So we're very fortunate here and to have a working relationship like that.
That's awesome. That's good. That's real good.
Yeah.
Because like you said, that's in today's world, it seems like I know I've spoke with a couple guys out west, California in particular, to where they're super quick on people that are writing these laws and rules that know nothing about it. It'll just be somebody sitting in the room. Yep, we should ban this. We should do away with this. And they're so quick into just, they don't understand it. Yep, this looks terrible. And they'll write a law. And I think what I'm getting after is along with that organization, any organization, you should be a member of something. These organizations fight for these rights that there's so much stuff that happens behind closed doors in a lot of these states that we don't realize.
Yeah.
And we're fortunate. I believe Indiana does do the best to their ability. We could be a lot worse off. We sit back sometimes, I think, and take for granted the state we live in when other states, like you were referring to the East Coast or the West Coast, that these guys that would love to enjoy doing what you're doing, but there's people writing those laws that just.
I think I want to make sure. I think the West. I said West Coast. I think the West Coast is pretty good. I know there are a lot of really good falconers. Because, dude, have you ever been out west, like California and Arizona? And those places are amazing. The amount of landscapes and the different species that are kind of all kind of in close proximity to each other. It's wild out there. And you start watching these guys that are doing falconry out there. They're not dressing up in armor to go in and brush through thorns. Like those guys have wide open expanses. It's cool. That place is cool out there. I'm jealous. I'm jealous of those people out there.
Well, I mean, can you take your
You
bird
you
and
can.
travel wherever, like as long as you're within that state's regulations, I guess?
Yep. Yeah, you just buy you got to check. I think you just buy a hunting license, just like a small game hunting license for whatever you're going after. If you're doing ducks, you got to follow the same regulations that any duck hunter does. But yeah, you can, and that's what those big meets are for. The cool thing about going to a falconry meet as opposed to just going with like one person all the time, is you get to experience some very good people that have been doing it for a very long time and lots of different species in the same day, right? So you got some guy who's dedicated 20 years to goshawks next to some guy who's got like a cast of Harris hawks, which is going to be two completely different experiences. They're both hunting rabbits, but it's going to be wildly different, right? As opposed to then you turn around and some guy's got a dog and a red tail. Like you kind of get like a good general overview of what your area has to provide, as opposed to like you get some of these books and everything, and you start daydreaming about like exotic species or flying something like I'll say Oplomato falcon, right? You're like, well, Oplomato falcon, well, what's that? It's a small falcon that hunts more like a hawk than it does, its tail pursuits. They're beautiful. I think they're pretty pricey. You're not going to get one out of the wild. You got to get one from a breeder, as far as I'm aware. But those things die so fast around here because everything wants to eat them, right? So that's not necessarily a good choice, right? Not a lot of people are going to have one. You're gonna start finding out what's realistic, because just because you can have something doesn't mean you should. Now, again, if you're just holding it up in front of a classroom, that's not falconry. Like there are avenues to get those types of birds and do that. But it's just I really think being a part of a club is very important when it comes to this stuff. A lot, falconers end up being very independent, just kind of strong-willed people that have an opinion and a certain way they want to do something because that's what's worked for them. And it's just really important, I think, for those people to kind of join together and just so there's representation, like you said, but it gives you, man, because you'll fight for just a little bit of information that is been slipping your like you can't find in all these books. You'll have a whole stack of books you're reading through, and it'll just be that one conversation you have with someone. It's like, oh, that's how you're getting around that problem. And without being a part of these groups, you don't get that.
Right. That's a real important thing for somebody to listen, or that's maybe already started their journey into doing this. That's a real good piece of advice for somebody, because I could see that. It's just like with coyote hunting.
Yeah.
I mean, you can read and listen to, or more or less read, I guess, so many different opinions, but you still kind of get stuck in the same, well, it's not really answering that question, or, how do I go about doing this? You get around a good group of guys that's like-minded and you can discuss it, and then all of a sudden it clicks to you one day.
So yeah, I basically that property that we've got that I'm trying to get rabbits on, you put trail cameras up and you see a pack of coyotes going through there constantly every night, and it's like, I've shot the target of opportunity living out there and stuff, but to start targeting them has just kind of been a recent thing. And I've got my buddy Alex, which he's into wired hair pointing griffons and been into that into the whole dog pointing world and has done really well with that. So he's an interesting guy when it comes to that topic. But him and I, and then my wife's uncle, Tim Conley, who has Tim Conley Outdoors. He's big into photography. He's actually out in Yellowstone right now, photographing like moose and buffalo.
That's
and
badass.
Yeah, he was sending me some pictures of coyotes and stuff out there. So yeah, he's got some really good photography stuff. And then his son Clint also. That's kind of the crew that I'm hunting coyotes with. But yeah, my goal, I don't know about their goal. My goal is to eliminate them from my little neck of the woods, just because I'm trying to get the rabbit numbers up, and then we go off wherever they want to go chase coyotes also. But man, those hunting with thermals, that's a game changer. That's like really, you have a superpower.
Yeah, I know that's when I first looked through a thermal 5, 6 years ago now, from
Yeah.
all those years hunting them with, red lights or whatever,
Yeah.
daytime hunting them, to where when you look through a thermal and you could see out there 800, 1,000 yards
Yeah.
and just 100%. I'm watching field mice run around.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how much that
Yeah.
changed the game.
Yeah. It's wild. We've played the bait pile game some, had success with that. And then recently been running the call. I started with some cheap call. I don't even remember what it was. And got fed up with that and ended up going with a Fox Pro, just so I had something that was like reliable and actually turned on when you tried to turn it on and stuff. Um, I'm doing, and like I was alluding to earlier, I'm running an AR 223 and been running through different types of ammunition, trying to find one that drops them, and have not. I've had more runoffs than the other guys. We got Clint's running a 22 250, like you were saying that you ran, and it's like he turns them off whenever he hits them, and it's
Right.
pretty impressive. Uh, Alex, he ended up running it. He just got a 204 Ruger.
Okay.
Have you played with those at
Oh
all?
yeah. Oh yeah. I
Yeah,
wasn't. I That's a super fast round.
yeah,
I just wasn't a fan of I guess the knockdown power of the 204. Super fur friendly. If you're after fur friendly,
yeah.
I
And
think 204 is the way
that's
to
what we've
go.
been doing with them. We've been skinning them. Of course, you're not selling them or anything, but we skin them and then uh, turn around and have somebody else stand the hides for us. And gotten into a couple fox. We had a night the other night where pulled up to a farm lot and looked through the thermals like, oh, they're already here. Like they're everywhere. And you get out and you start playing to them. I think there was like 4 or 5 running around,
Oh wow. That's
and
cool.
they're doing their little fox sounds, which I'd never heard in person. You can look it up and hear their weird sounds or whatever. But yeah, calling to each other and just running around. And, you know, we had some very humbling shot misses because they're so tiny. It's like you think you got it nailed down, and it just, I think we had 3 get away that it was just like, I don't know anymore. I was so confident. And now all of a sudden, like everything I've believed is not, turned upside down. But they'll run half mile out. You just keep that call playing, and they seem to circle right back and come back in.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems
It's
like
just,
when we were talking about that, how we're starting to get more fox around here. And it just seems like those things are, I'm not going to say they're stupid, but it's like you could almost guarantee now you see something coming in downwind from 600, 700 yards out, and you're like, I'm not for sure if that's a fox or a coyote yet, until so you can see its tail, then you really know.
yeah,
But if it's coming in downwind, it's like I'm about 90% confident that's a fox, because
yeah.
those things just don't seem like they care. They just do
No,
fox
they're
stuff.
interesting, man. They're interesting little things.
Right. What kind of thermals you guys run?
So I've
Or
got
they
an
run?
AGM. Um, it's the varmint one with the rangefinder on it. Now I got to send it back in for warranty work or something at some point, because that rangefinder, it doesn't seem to work past like 50 yards or something. So it used to work just fine. So I'll have to send that back in. But other than that little hiccup, I really like it. Um,
Do
Plant
you
is
run
running.
scanners as well?
Yeah, yeah. I got their little Typhoon scanner. That scanner, that's another thing. If you just have it on the rifle, it's like you get tired awful quick of holding the rifle and swiveling back and forth. Like that scanner is worth the money to get. It didn't even have to be like a super knife, just something that you can, see and use just real quick. Pulsar is the other one that we're running a Pulsar.
That's what I run's Pulsar.
Yeah,
I started off with an ATN, and
yeah,
that was like, was it a 1x5? I mean, the base mag was like 1.5. I mean, this scope was, I'm amazed I even killed anything with that scope looking back, because it's
yeah,
like you just literally, even at 75 yards, it'd just be a white blob or
yeah,
a black blob. That's all it
yeah,
was. And then when I
yeah,
jumped, I got my first scanner was an AGM.
Yeah.
And that's when I became of a believer more of a better quality scanner's worth its weight in gold.
Yeah. Yeah. I forget what the exact model of mine is, but I did a little bit of researching, and it was like I got the one that people were saying like this is the first level that's not terrible. And I was
Right.
like, okay, I just went up to that mark. It's like they're like, here, this one's usable. You get this one if you're starting out. It's like, okay, that's the one I got.
Yeah, because there is a lot. It seems like now there's a lot of cheap. Like I think, man, I've seen some scanners for like $600.
Ah, yeah. Well, I tell you what, those AGMs, they came out with like a version two, and the version twos are better and cheaper.
See, that's amazing to me. Like I
Yeah.
still think of when I bought my XG50 3 years ago, and it was like $7,500
It,
for that scope. And now you can buy a 640 an XP 660 for $5,500.
yeah.
And it's like it's amazing where this technology's come to, and the prices of this stuff is
Yeah.
so cheap.
It's like it's going through the same thing that big screen TVs went through, right? Big screen TVs used to
Right.
be like super expensive. Now they're like $300 and you get like a giant one.
Right.
Yeah, so it's like the same thing's happening.
It's almost heartbreaking in a way because,
Yeah.
well,
Is
Bill
that
just
Barry?
got, yeah, he just got that new, was an XG60. And looking through that, and then I turned around and looked through my, one point in time was Pulsar's flagship,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's like, I don't even want to look through my scope anymore. It's like,
Dude, and it's hard to like you can't sell it
no,
because it's like they can get better, cheaper stuff. So
right.
it's just your backup setup at that point.
Yeah. Cause he's going through that he's got was it the XQ, the 384 model, XQ50, and
Yeah.
it's only 2 years old, but they came down brand new $1,000 for what he paid for it in
Yeah.
2 years. So it's like, and then I don't blame anybody. Like, well, you might as well spend an extra $700-800 to buy a new one. Well, he's going to take a $2,000 hit.
Yeah.
It's like, well, at that point, you might as well keep it.
We were talking about my buddy Alex. He didn't have a thermal. He was the guy running the spotter and the call, right? So after a while, he was like, I can't stand anymore. I have to get one. And so he just got like a base model AGM real quick just to get out and get hunting with us. It was like seven something, 700, $800, something like just like the base model. I think it was a Rattler or something.
Yeah.
And looking at how fast everything's coming, it's like, hey man, just we'll just hang tight for 2 or 3 years and all that fancy stuff will come right down into our grasp. It's like it's coming.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're not wrong. I mean, the market's so flooded now with just the amount of used stuff that's out there. They
Yeah.
got to do something. I mean, in my opinion, I knew those
Yeah.
prices would eventually come down the more popular it got.
Yeah.
It's flat amazed me in the last year the amount of the popularity. It's seems like everybody now is
It,
running a
it,
thermal.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. So what do you, when you guys are going out, are you running ARs or you guys running, you just said you're running a bolt gun, that
Yeah,
2250. Is
yeah.
bolt guns basically what you
No,
guys are all running?
I've always ran a
Oh,
bolt gun, and then I
six
upgraded to a
five is what he said.
6.5.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
run a
right.
6.5 Creedmoor now.
Yeah.
Bill he upgraded to a bolt gun this year. He runs, I think it's Seekins, I think is the name of it.
Yeah.
He runs a Seekins 6.5 Creedmoor now, bolt gun. He ran
Yeah.
an AR. I personally don't see the benefit of an AR over a bolt gun. I know guys say the follow up shots, but from what I've noticed,
You don't need a
since I've
fault.
since I've kind of I was that way too. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
5 years ago, I'd empty 6 shots. I'd run that bolt as fast as I could.
Oh, yeah. I had a $15, $20 Fox run off the other night.
And you're not wrong there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
But I've noticed that if you shoot and you miss,
Mhm.
a lot of times whoever's running that call, if they're super quick on going to some, if say you were running prey distress, if you're super quick into
Yeah.
hitting a pup distress, a lot of times that coyote's only going to run out there another 50, 60 yards and stop.
Really.
Or it's going to slow down enough. It's going to give you a better shot opportunity than
Your backup guy, or you have time to run the bolt.
right. Like even just paying attention to a lot of these videos you see guys posting.
Mm-hmm.
How many times if you notice after that first shot, say it's a double, it comes in, you're running solo and you shoot and drop that first one. When you look, pay attention to what that second one's doing in that video, a lot of times it's not running full bore
Yeah.
until they shoot at it.
Yeah. See, I had one a couple weeks ago. I had where I shot the first one, swung to the second one, and the second one just 20-yard trot and spun and stopped and got the second one. Now the first one, he vanished. He got up and ran. And I hit him with the 223. That's where I'm like, it doesn't feel like it's got enough thump. And then I don't know if it's like, well, you're just not hitting them in the right spot. You're just not.
What are you running currently right now, ammo wise?
It's that 23 grain VMAX, I think is what I hit him with.
Oh, the 53s. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what Jeff Nimnick swears by that round.
Dude, it opens them up when you hit them, because that second one, it opened them up. I've had a couple others I've dropped with it. It just, I don't know. Maybe I just need to be a better shot. Maybe it's a secret.
We talked about that. I think that if you're running a daytime scope,
Yeah.
you're a hell of a lot more precise putting that exactly where it needs to be. Running a thermal, I maybe some of this brand new stuff I have noticed is a lot more clear. You're zoomed in a lot more.
Yeah.
With that base mag to where you can be a little bit more precise on where you're putting that.
Yeah.
But when you're still shooting off of a tripod and you're still a little bit shaky, you're not,
right.
Sitting on a real world
sled or something. Yeah. Yeah.
It's, you might as well jump up to a 6.5 in my opinion.
Yeah. So have you
6 Creed? But.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you this: that new 22 arc. Have you played with that, or have you heard anybody talking about that at all?
I've heard guys talk about it.
Because that's piqued my interest.
The way I look at that round is you might as well stay with what you have.
Yeah.
Unless you plan on shooting. It seems like that 22 arc, the advantage to it is you're going to get more flat, longer range out of it.
Yeah.
I personally don't think you're getting the knockdown.
Yeah.
Because you still see mixed reviews when you see somebody ask about a 22 arc. Seems like it's a 50-50. This review is going to say it's the best round, since the 300 Win Mag. And then you're going to see a guy say that it's, junk. Have runners with them. So I personally, that's why I went with the 6.5 Creedmoor, or that six Creedmoor. Those are rounds when you see that are brought up, or like a 243. I think they fall underneath that category.
I swapped out. I swapped out my daytime setup as a 243. I run that Savage Impulse, that straight pull.
Yeah,
and then I got a Vortex scope on there with that. I think it's like a Kent Industries turret. It's just got the distance on there, so you just pull it up, spin it to your distance, click it down. It's all set up. I think I'm running a 75 grain VMAX out of that, and yeah, it's dead on. Yeah, it's sweet.
I personally think even fur friendly, shooting those 95 grain VMAXs with that 6.5, I very seldom do I blow holes in them. Honestly, when I started pulling off of the shoulder, because I was so used to shooting that 250 to where I'd really tuck it in tight to that shoulder to where I'd get maximum expansion out of it, balloon it, and they'd fall down. that 6.5, if I'm hitting just in behind that shoulder more, it's going in the size of your thumb and coming out like
Yeah,
maybe the size of a $50. Like it's not really blowing them out.
yeah, because when we first started doing this, we ran we did one stand in the daytime and called in a big male, and I shot it with 6.5. I think it was just like a 140 grain something. It was not like a varmint round, and it was like thumb hole in and out on both sides, and it rolling backwards, and it was like, oh wow, that did the trick.
The one thing that really turned me on to the one of the coolest videos I seen, I think Hornady. It might be on like their podcast, or it was maybe a short clip or something they had on YouTube. But they showed what it does to that ballistics gel. It's not so much the entrance and the exit. They called it like the balloon theory, how much it inflates that coyote when it hits them. And it was something like 3 times its normal size.
Like that, what was it hydrostatic shock? Just that
Right.
shock that blows through them. Yeah.
Because that's what at first I was like, oh man, it doesn't really, it's not really expanding. It's not really doing anything. And I remember seeing that.
And it is. It's just not. Yeah. You
I was
just
like,
don't
holy
know
crap, it's happening so fast, you're not seeing it.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of times I've walked out there and I flipped that dog over and been like, where'd I even hit this thing?
Huh. Huh.
And so I don't know. I think that argument of fur friendly and oh, you're just blowing them to pieces. Well,
Yeah.
I remember with my 250, which is in my opinion one of the most iconic coyote rounds out there, is 22 250.
Yeah.
I've probably blown more fist size holes or bigger in a coyote with my 250 than I ever did that 6.5 so far.
Yeah, and I wonder if a lot of it is like they market these coyote rounds as like varmint rounds, right? So you're getting a fragmenting round when you're hitting them, but that's the same stuff you're blowing ground hogs up with and stuff. It's like if you went to a round that held together, like I don't know, your deer round or something like that. Even target rounds, I think, are basically a varmint round, aren't they? Don't they fragment and blow up a target round? Doesn't
Possibly.
it? Yeah, I heard someone talking about it. It's like, there's not really much of a difference between a varmint round and a target round. But if you have one that's like meant to hold together for bigger game, then you're just poking holes through them, and it doesn't damage the fur like that. Because you hear the whole theory about it, like it goes in, explodes, and doesn't come out the other side. It's like, well, yeah, in a perfect scenario, but like you're not hitting them in a perfect scenario every time, and that big explosion happens on the other end and blows it out.
Right.
So your fur friendly varmint round is now like you're grenading them from the inside.
Right. I think that's why back in the day, those match rounds were so popular. I know Les Johnson, that's all he would run, I believe, was a match round.
Yeah.
Because they were real fur friendly. But that terminal that hit with that velocity, when it hit them and it would just blow them up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then now with all the technology, like they got that new, what's it, ELDT?
ELD, yeah.
Yeah. That's supposed to be more designed for a coyote round.
Yeah.
Supposedly. But I feel terrible when you get talking about ammo and stuff because I should know more than I do.
Yeah.
And I don't. I got a guy for
well,
that.
it's one of those things. Yeah, it's one of those things that's like a hot topic for like a couple weeks as you're like trying to get it all dialed in and figured out. And then once you do, you kind of forget it because you're not studying it anymore.
Right. Because I remember I shot every grain size and every brand around with that 250 when I switched over to thermal, trying to figure out why all of a sudden I've shot a 55 grain, VMAX out of that 250 for 20 years and never had a problem. Then I go to a nighttime and I'm like, well, is it me? Is it my nerve? What's going on here? Maybe it's the bull. And always got the same result. So I went back to it and it's like, well,
yeah, you're just not poking them where you think you're poking them. I bet you're right on that. I bet that has a lot to do with it.
I firmly believe in that theory. Like, because even with the older scopes, when you only had a 1 or 2 base mag, if that coyote was more than 50 yards out, you weren't getting a real good picture of what you're shooting at. And even a lot of this newer stuff, that's why anytime anybody asks me what they should get, I say the higher the base mag, the better you are, in my
Oh,
opinion.
really? Well, yeah. If you're
Unless
running
you're
scan, if as long as you got a scanner with you, then yeah, I'd go for
yeah,
that.
unless you're hunting in an area, if you're trying to hunt in like the freaking timber or everything's within 50 yards of you, okay, then maybe you don't want a freaking 3 or 4 base mag. That 2 is probably better.
Yeah.
But for more of a Midwestern style setting, in my opinion, over ag fields, have your scanner with that 2 base mag, but your scope should be a 3.5, in my opinion.
I think mine's a 3, and my scanner I think is just a straight 1. And yeah, we're seeing them. We're setting up, and it's great when the snow's out because we snow camo up and just crouch down real low and go right out in the middle and set up. And you're usually seeing them maybe like 500-600 yards out, and they're still working their way in.
Yeah, and that to me, that's the scanners. Once I know something's out there and it's coming, then I get down on my gun, and then that's where that's kind of where I'm positively identifying 100% by the body, mannerisms and all that. That okay, this is a coyote. Like I know this.
Now, are you
Here
starting? You usually start with a predator, like a rabbit distress or something like that, and then move through a couple of them, and then move on to coyote sounds.
It depends on the time of year, or
we'll say this time of year. So we're
right now,
in first week of February, right? So mating season's about to kick off.
So
or is right.
Right now, I'm going in with with a howl.
Yeah,
I'll just play a lone howl. Just let her howl off one time, and then I'll pause it, and then wait a minute or so, and then I'll find a different howl because I run a lucky duck call.
Yeah.
So I can run 2 sounds at one time, which I don't know if you can with.
Yeah, I think
I've never really ran a Fox Pro or the newer Fox Pro.
Yeah, I think because I've gotten in trouble with that where I think I'm switching sounds. Now I got them both playing at the same time. I tell you what, the best thing I could do is probably learn how to run that call better. That'd probably be the best thing I could do. But yeah.
Right. And then I'll find a second coyote. So I'll let it howl a couple times. And then I'll wait a couple minutes. And then I'll play like a pair howl. Or I'll play them 2 at the same time. So it imitates like a pair howl. And then if nothing happens, I'll go into like a prey type distress. And then, but that's kind of I don't always do that either.
It depends. Yeah, I know. We kind of
I enjoy answering these questions, but at the same time, I hate them because it's like it's all situational. It truly is, and I can't explain that enough. When you tell somebody that, they almost look at you and go, "Oh, this guy's giving me a generic answer. He doesn't want to tell me."
I get it because we go out and do the same thing because like you try one spot and you're like, well, we've struck out twice now. Let's try something else. And so you end up switching it all up. So there's no like real consistent answer.
And plus, I go off of historically what's going on too.
Yeah.
Like I try to think back to last year in February. Man, when I was really struggling, when the weather was kind of like this and it was around this time, what was I doing? Sometimes I just played prey distress only. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I think that matters of how pressured is an area. Mm-hmm. I know certain areas we go in to call, to my knowledge, yes, we might not be calling the same exact 80-acre field, but on that country mile, there's 15 or 20 different people own, a 20-acre, 30-acre parcel on that. So theoretically, we're all calling the same coyotes.
Yeah.
Just because nobody's calling that exact spot doesn't mean you're not. So
Yeah, every time they hear a rabbit scream, they get shot at.
Yeah, I do lean towards that theory.
Yeah.
Because Brandon, for an example, we went to a spot where I know for a fact I personally had called the backside of this like a week before.
Yeah.
I know two other hunters hunt pretty much the adjoining property. And I go in with him. He's doing the calling. I scan out there and I see two coyotes. And they couldn't give two flipping shits about what his call was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking to myself, oh, okay, I run a Lucky Tuck. He's running a Fox Pro. I know this guy over here is running a Fox Pro. And I ask him, I said, man, you got Lightning Jack on that? And he looks at me and he goes, well, yeah. He said, but why would I play that? Everybody plays that. I'm like, not everybody's. I said, everybody's got so excited about what MFK sound. Or I said, Lightning Jack is old school for the old school guys.
Yeah.
Like I said, that sounds killed me more coyotes than anything else. And I don't even run a Fox Pro.
Yeah.
But he switched over and started playing Lightning Jack. I literally watched both. As soon as he switched over from whatever sounds he was playing, I watched those coyotes go from mousing to snapping. It's like they broke their necks. They snapped their head around so fast. And they covered 500 yards in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Came barreling right in. So that's a prime example of he tried 4 or 5 different freaking prey distresses, and they never picked their head up. And I'm not going to say which ones they are because I don't want to say that anybody's shit's junk because it's not.
Yeah.
I think it's all in your situation, but
yeah,
literally they were 4 or 5 of the sounds that you read everybody saying on every group that these are perfect. And he played a freaking 20-year-old sound in Lightning Jack.
Yeah.
That brought him in.
Yeah, so, that's good. Yeah.
So I really lean more towards of just mixing that library up. Of don't get set in these specific 4 or 5 sounds, because how many eyes when you're scrolling through them Facebook groups and somebody says, hey, shot this sounds working great. Well, as soon as somebody posts a picture, I don't care what anybody says, somebody posts a picture and says, yep, this coyote came into Crazy Rabbit. Well, I can promise you that there's going to be at least 1,000 other guys, if not more, that are going to go out that night and beat the hell out of that sound.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, so I just mix it up, man. Honestly, it's if when I go out, once I find whatever recipe is working tonight, like I'll go out and I'll call tonight, and I will bounce around and try until I find whatever it is, and then I will just beat the hell out of that sound the rest of the night.
Yeah. I'll have to give that a try. That's good advice.
A lot of times, if you're getting a lot of vocal response out of them, it seems like to me that's when your fight sounds are going to work the most.
The fight sound, yeah, because we had a scenario where we had a lot of vocals. We had them kind of picked in 3 different directions, and they seemed to, and this was maybe about a month ago, they seemed to not want to come into it. They just kind of kept getting further and further away, and we didn't know if we were getting too aggressive with them. And so they, you start picking a fight and kind of upping the chorus of everything, and it seemed like they wanted to holler back, but they didn't want to necessarily come and fight us.
Well, probably you might.
Yeah,
have.
I mean, that was just
it might have been.
Right?
It could have been a couple transients. That's not really the breeding pair in that area.
Just not wanting to get in trouble.
That exactly that, or working their way through, and they might have already got their butt whipped an hour before then.
Yeah,
where they're just like, I've had enough this night. I just want to snack. Like
that game, it's such an interesting game once you get out there, and it's laughing about it with my buddies. It's like we're not staying out late. It's like 1 o'clock. That's it. And you end up in some scenario and you're just like, oh no, we're gonna be here forever, aren't we? Like this is like I'm not leaving right now.
Oh, it
Like this is
happens
this
to
is too
be,
good.
yeah, it happens to us all the time. Like every time, it almost became a joke one year. Every time we'd be like, man, we're packing, we're only going out for 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
We'd be out all night, and those would be the best nights of calling we ever had.
Yeah.
So it started to become a joke to where it was like, yep, we're only going out for 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, yeah. I know, man. It's a trap. It's fun though.
Yeah, because
Um,
you can go out and make 4 or 5 just complete dry stands. And then it's like a light switch will come on and you'll hammer a double, go to the next set, call in a quad, and then the next set, call in another double. And then,
so have you guys ever thought about going out at like getting up at like 3 a.m. and going out?
yep,
Have you done that?
yep,
Yeah.
yep. I just did that. Was it last week?
Yeah.
Because I hunted for probably 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks, every other night, every night.
Yeah.
And it would be completely dead. I wouldn't hear or hardly see a cop. Might see one or two,
Yeah.
and then come about 2 in the morning, we'd start killing them, or I'd start killing them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what we're
So
running
then
into
it's
like
like I'm not
that.
going to waste my time anymore.
Yeah.
I'll wake up at 2 a.m. and go
Yeah.
out, and I was successful doing that.
Yeah.
But
That's
then
what
all of
we're
a sudden it stopped. What the reason behind it is, I don't know. I
mm,
I used to keep a detailed every time I'd go out. I had a journal. I still have them from 45, 6 years ago. Every
yeah.
time I'd go out, I'd write down the date, the temperature, what the weather was doing, the moon, the
Yeah.
pressure, everything, and try to think, okay, sky deer hunting. I have my deer hunting hat on, like
Yeah.
I'm going to figure these things out. And every time I would start getting close to where I would think, okay, hey, if the pressure was around here and the weather was like this is when I'd get my best response. I would go out the next 4 times and nothing would happen.
Yeah. Do they just, I wonder if they just don't operate like that. They must just travel a bigger area and just kind of be sporadic in what they're doing. I mean, because we haven't come up with a pattern. I've got cell cameras and a couple choke points, and you'll end up in a scenario where there's three coming through twice a night for like a week, and then they're gone for a month, and then all of a sudden they show back up again, and then you get a random fox, and then
Yeah.
it's like this doesn't make none of this makes sense.
Yeah. The only thing I have I think there is a couple things, but like I run a bait pile at my house too.
Mm-hmm.
That's super effective for right here.
Um,
Because I mean, it's nothing to kill 50 to 60 off of my bait pile every winter.
that's impressive.
And what's crazy is you might shoot one or two every couple weeks from October until about the middle of January. And then all of a sudden I'll shoot one every night, two a night for 3 weeks, a month.
Yeah,
And then it'll just stop and you'll go back to where you might see one or two, a week
yeah,
off of it.
huh?
But the only thing I've ever thought that might have some kind of similarities, and that's the breeding is picking around that time. It
Yeah.
seems to be that's when the alphas are really certain they're kicking out, you know, the kids or whatever.
So there's just a lot more traveling.
Transients.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
But I'm no damn biologist, so I can't really
Right.
answer that. But that's what
Right.
I've noticed because the 3 years I've lived here and I've had a bait pile, I've noticed that same. Like, there's
Same
not
pattern.
really a pattern. I even hate saying that it's one or two every few weeks because hell, you might go a whole month and there you won't even see a coyote one touch it. I mean, at all. And then all of a sudden, one will start coming around. Well, then you shoot it. It may take a week or two, and another one will come around.
Now,
But
when you're skinning coyotes and you've got a dead coyote, have you ever thrown them in your bait pile and had it shut off all activity,
Yeah.
or do you use them as bait?
No. I I
Because
experimented.
all right, so I got a big thing of meat here, and you throw it out there, and it's like now you had coyotes coming in, and now there's nothing, and not till that's gone for a week do they start showing back up again.
I have experienced that.
Yeah, okay.
Like I've noticed that. I've seen guys post stuff and be like, "Oh, I just leave them lay there and I'll shoot them over it." And it's like
I
maybe
mean,
that
maybe
work.
sometimes. I mean,
Yeah,
I've gotten one like
maybe
that,
that
but
does work. But I have noticed.
I think it affects it. I think it affects it. I know somebody else is running a big pile. They're talking about like, man, it was great till I dragged that coyote out there, and then now it's off. I haven't seen one in 3 weeks.
I've and another thing I've noticed too is I have 90% more success over deer than I do hogs, calves, anything like that.
Yeah,
Like, we butcher our own beef and pork and all that. Yeah,
deer's what they
they'll
want.
come into it, but it doesn't seem
I've used
like a
geese.
roadkill. A roadkill deer is the hands down, guts still in it. You go find a roadkill deer, get the tag from the sheriff or whatever,
Yeah,
and just throw that thing out there. I have amazing success over a roadkill deer, and I do anything else.
yeah. We were using Canadian geese after you breast them out and stuff.
Right.
That was then we were having quite a bit of luck off that.
So I'm not a waterfowl hunter.
Yeah, we've gotten into that a
I
little
never got
bit.
into that, but
It's fun. Hey, shotgunning geese is fun.
it is. I mean,
It's fun.
I've went, but I never for some reason that bug never bit me.
Yeah,
Everything else I've done has,
yeah.
but
It's a good filler for when it's raining because can't fly your hawk in the rain. So it's like, well, you can waterfowl. So
I guess that's where the
yeah,
saying it's good weather for a duck.
that's right. That's right.
But
Yeah,
yeah, but the bait pile to me is just when I'm at home, I got a camera on it.
yeah. Yeah, same.
Like
That's the way to do
it's,
it. It's yeah, it's fun.
I mean,
It's
I've
fun.
got
Plus, you get to watch everything else that walks by it, sniffs it.
right and watch them because I've set 3 or 4 different cameras up before. And a lot of times you can watch these coyotes circle this bait pile for 2 or 3 nights before they even
Yeah,
come
I've run into
into it.
that. I've run into that. I've noticed that. Yeah, they'll check it out. They'll be gone for a night, and then they start coming back in. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I've even watched them through the scope. It's like that. Man, they are real nervous to touch it. They just circle and circle and circle and work it until they finally come in.
Right. But nothing beats going out, calling,
Yeah, I agree.
and having those.
It's
I think it
cool.
was when I was talking to JD Pyatt about it, like 5, 6 years ago. I would do anything to go back and experience that every night
Yeah,
because it was amazing. When we first started hunting with thermals, I mean, I sent my call, or Rick's had to send me 2 different motors within 2 weeks because on the Lucky Duck, you can rotate them. And I'd have those coyotes come barreling in and attacking that call. And they'd hit that call so hard, they'd strip that motor out.
yeah, yeah. That sounds fun.
And it was nuts. Like,
I have
shut,
not had one run the call over yet.
and now I don't think I could pay one
Yeah.
to do that. Like, they, have you noticed that where you're at? I mean, I guess I don't know how much
Yeah.
thought you put
No, I haven't
into
been
it.
doing it. I haven't been doing it long enough. We just got into it last year, heavy, and I mean heavy, like only gone out like maybe a dozen times. We're not like to your guys' level, but what we've run into is them hanging up kind of far out. Like we've had a couple come charging in, and they'll get within like 60 yards. At that point, we start shooting because we're trying to get them before they recognize that there's like something up.
Right.
but we've had a couple hang up like maybe 150 yards, something like that. And that's, I watched your podcast the other day. It was talking about having a team and having like your long shooter and your guy
Oh
that
yeah.
shoots when they come running up. And it's like, yeah, the guy running 22-250, that's the long shot. And if there's something right in front of us going back and forth, I've got the AR. So it's like, if it's running and I'm shooting, and so that's kind of the role I've fallen into.
Yeah, that's critical, especially I've had a lot of people ask. That's why I did that episode over tournaments, because
Yeah.
I haven't done that many this year. I've been busy doing this and a few other things, life, I guess. But
Yeah.
the repetitiveness of doing it with the same person and figuring out, hey, man, this is what this dude's good at, or this is what this
Yeah.
guy's good at. Because you can go out and win
Yeah.
some money in some of these things, like, especially
Yeah.
now. If you're in an area and you got your team put together, I mean, there's nothing to see 30, 40 teams in some of these tournaments and have a $3,000 or $4,000 pot to
Yeah.
where on the right night, especially these big three, man, it's nothing to really. I mean,
Yeah.
you could call in three freaking 37, 38-pound, 40-pound coyotes. It's a good night.
Yeah, we were talking to some people that there was a contest around here. I think they had 45 teams, and we didn't know about it until day of. And we were already going out. We went out and shot a couple, and I think if we'd have been in the contest, we'd have been in like fourth or third place or something like that.
Right.
It's like, oh, maybe we ought to take this one more serious than we thought.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing the popularity when we 5, 6 years ago, when I did my first tournament, it was a lot different than it is now. Five,
Yeah,
6 years ago, if you entered a tournament, odds were around here, you may have only seen 15, maybe 20 teams.
yeah,
But those 15, 20 teams were some bad mofos. Like
yeah,
these dudes were legit. So and back then, it was mainly they were most. You didn't see hardly anything that had to do with the big three or big five. It was
yeah,
numbers.
yeah.
And
It's, hmm,
guys,
yeah,
there were some dudes that put up, and still to this day, there's some guys around here that put up some banging numbers. They'll put up
yeah.
20, 25 a night.
It's good. I mean that serves my purpose because just being selfish, I want rabbits. I want rabbits, a small game because of the whole falconry thing, right? So I was listening to another podcast. They were talking about there was some small town. I think this guy was out in Idaho or something. And he was saying that there was a group of local guys in this small town that just annihilated coyotes like every year. That was just their hobby. And that town for whatever reason, for that reason, had like great rabbit numbers. And he's like, oh, this is awesome. Like hawking all the time, rabbits everywhere and stuff. And as that group of guys aged out, they kind of quit hunting and coyotes moved back in and the rabbit numbers dropped. So hopefully, I'm thinking in the back of my head, like the more this gets popular and that they start getting like put down, that hopefully small game will start popping back up and be my life will get a little easier.
Oh, for sure. Because I've noticed that where I live, when I first started coyote hunting at night, we were lucky to see rabbit wise. I mean, you go rabbit hunting, you were lucky to kill one or two rabbits. We
Yeah.
started coyote hunting at night and started putting up good numbers. Back then, you could easily kill 10 a night
That's a lot.
and not really work that hard at it. Like, I mean, I'll get made fun of, but they were stupid back then. I swear.
Yeah.
Like shooting them at night, it was unfair. It was
Yeah.
unfair with thermals. They used to own the night back
Yeah.
then. Now they don't. But
Yeah.
and I've slowly seen our rabbit numbers. Just now, I can't walk down to my deer stand without jumping 5 or 6 rabbits. The amount of pheasants I'm seeing, the rabbits I'm seeing.
You guys got pheasants up there, huh?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
we don't have any of those down here.
When I moved into this property, we were lucky to see one, maybe two.
Yeah.
Now, I don't
Now
know
you
what
got people. You got people cutting them loose up there, or are there enough around that
I
they're?
there's nobody that cuts them loose that I know of.
Yeah.
I think that there was enough around to where over the course of the last 3 years, I think it's starting to become a more
That's
established
cool.
breeding population. Like,
That's
and
cool.
I mean, I haven't seen a fox on my property until 3 weeks ago. I got a trail cam picture of a fox, and I'm
Yeah.
like, okay. I mean, for 2.5, 3 years, I never had a picture of a fox,
Mhm.
and now I got him again last night, picture of a fox. So
Yeah.
that's telling me something. So anybody that says you can't really control the coyote population, I'll argue with them on that because I
But
think
you can sure tip the scale.
exactly.
It may not be a done deal, but you can put your thumb on it and really help things
Yeah.
out.
The best analogy I ever heard put was like mowing the grass.
Yeah,
Like it's always
exactly.
going to be there. The more you do it, the shorter it stays.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And I know in certain areas I haven't called for, probably a year. I'm starting to notice the numbers are a little higher because there's nobody else in that area that really hunts. So if you start keeping if you back the pressure off, I think they move in extremely fast.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Like
agree with that.
I think they do, but I think if you start killing the crap out of them right now in that end of February, 1st of March, when those breeding alpha pairs are established,
Hmm.
and you really go into that area and just hammer the crap out of them, I think that helps suppress those numbers because there's really not enough time left in the breeding season for a new female and a new male to come in, sync up, and
Yeah, they've
start
kind of
breeding.
yeah, they already had their territory somewhere else. So if you wipe out the ones in your
Right.
pocket, then you're kind of safe for a little while. Yeah.
Right. And maybe there's nothing to that on a big scale. I just know of in my county,
Right.
you know, in northern Wabash County, I know where most people hunt. Most guys that do hunt, I pretty much know who they are, where they are. And
Yeah.
you can tell in the numbers over time. A lot of guys,
It's just amazing. That is amazing how because I've jumped them doing dog work and stuff, or yeah, even with the falconry stuff. It's like you'll go into an area and there'll be one just kind of sleeping out in the middle of a field or something, and it's just surprising how they're kind of just everywhere.
right. Yeah, it's nuts. And I know there was certain areas we used to go to, we used to call our A spots. Like you knew if you were hunting a tournament and we were having a rough night, man, we knew if we drove 30 miles, say east,
Yeah,
you were guaranteed over there. And
yeah,
then all of a sudden, you're lucky to you can't buy a coyote over there. We start doing a little bit of research and you find out, oh, so and so is over there. So, you start hearing these names of these guys putting up big numbers and where they're
yeah.
from. And it's like, okay, this is so
That's
that
yeah,
should tell you it does something.
yeah,
When you start getting enough guys going in an area, you're lowering that population down. They're getting educated.
yeah.
I do hate using that word because everybody's got to learn somewhere.
Well, I mean, you get shot, it leaves an impression, I imagine. So,
I think so. I
yeah.
do. But, like I said, we all got to start somewhere. But at the same time, do they get too much credit? Maybe.
It's I think a lot of it, some of it is just they get suspicious of something they don't know what it is, and they hang up, and you may be attributing something to them that's not there. But then, yeah, I'm sure it goes both ways. Because
Yeah.
then you get one, it's like seeing three of his buddies get dropped to a screaming rabbit. It's like there's no way I'm going to a screaming rabbit. No way. Yeah,
Right.
that has to happen.
That's why when I did that one with JD Pyatt and he brought up that he wondered if, he raises them to get his sounds and all that. Some of them are more shy than others. Some are more aggressive. And when he
Mm-hmm.
was talking about if you shoot all the aggressive ones and all of these shyer ones, more timid ones, always do the breeding year after year after year.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Eventually, are they going to keep breeding more timid coyotes? And boy, that kind of sparked a little crap with some people. Like, oh, that would take generations. Well, it's like he didn't say it was going to happen overnight. But why is it 5, 6, 8, 10 years ago, you were getting so many coyotes coming in charging to this call? And
Yeah,
pups, like that was always the big thing. You very seldom do you say, well, that's just a stupid pup. Used to say that all the time. Now, even these pups aren't charging the call like they used to.
yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. Yeah, I've heard an argument before about talking about rattlesnakes, and people were saying, you know, if you kill the rattlesnakes that rattle when you walk up and find them, then the only thing that's going to be reproducing is rattlesnakes that don't rattle, and then you're going to end up getting bit, right? But then you got biologists involved, and they're like, no, they only rattle inside like a certain temperature band. So like you killing rattlesnakes because they're rattling or not rattling is like it's the whole causation correlation thing. Just because
Right.
it's so yeah, I can see both sides of that argument.
So could I. I found it very interesting.
Yeah, it's a good conversation piece for sure.
It is because I hunt them. At least through the season, I'm hunting them 4 to 5 nights a week and
Yeah,
have for 6 years since I got a
yeah,
permit. I've from basically pretty much December to March, I'm hunting them 4 to 5 times a week, all over. Like I
yeah,
I got spots I might only call once or twice a year. Like I hunt
yeah.
them all over, and to me, something has happened because why is it 5 years ago these things were just running? They'd run you over. They were everywhere,
Yeah.
and they seemed to be stupider.
Huh.
And you
Yeah, I
always
don't
you
know.
always did have one or two that you would see that stayed out.
Hmm.
You'd see a group of 6 or a group of 5. You'd have 3 or 4 hard chargers and one or two that stayed back. Now, when you go out, you really don't even have a hard charger anymore. That whole group or the 2 or 3 are just flanking you as far downwind as they can. Use every piece of terrain. They do everything in their power to get the wind before they come in. So,
Yeah,
how'd you go from that to that? Something happened somewhere.
yeah, yeah,
Even even in your lesser pressured areas, that's what they're doing. So,
yeah. That's yeah. We had one hard charger to a rabbit squeal, and other than that, we had two come in on coyote calls. But other than that, they've all kind of been pretty cautious.
that's just to me,
That's
it's
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah, it is.
I think it's definitely worth somebody talking about. I don't think anybody would ever know what it is.
Yeah,
Because you're going to have a guy that says what I'm seeing and I'm full of shit and I don't know what I'm doing.
yeah,
And then you're going to have the guy go, yeah, I have noticed that too.
yeah. Well, yeah, you'll never nail it down because even because guys are hunting different areas, right? They're hunting different
Right.
coyotes, so everyone's experiences are different anyway, and so it's hard to draw. You know, just because he's not seeing it doesn't mean it's not happening.
Right. And that's a big one. And we won't go down that rabbit hole. We got to jump off here anyways.
Yeah, yeah,
But when guys listen to how it was hunting coyotes out west versus here, a coyote is a coyote to a sense.
yeah, for sure. Well, the night game's new still. I mean, it's not like it's been around for a real long time. Like they'll, I'm sure that they'll start coming out with patterns and stuff of that kind of stuff as more people get into it.
Right. For sure. All righty. We'll jump off here. It's been been a while now. I'm keeping you all afternoon. Anybody that can find you, how can anybody get a hold, or I guess not so much get a hold of you or check out your videos?
Yeah, Instagram on Adam B780, and then on Facebook, Adam Brown. I'm on Facebook also. But yeah, if you're looking to get into falconry, hit up your state clubs. They're the ones that will hand it. They're really good about processing people and getting them involved. And I would encourage anyone who's interested to seek out your state clubs.
All right. I sure appreciate you taking the time this afternoon to come in.
It was fun.
What you do is awesome. Everybody, go out, make sure you shoot your guns, go shoot straight. See ya.